Ladies and gentlemen, I have a bit of a discovery to share with all of you. We all know that floors 3 and 4 of the ToA have arrived, right? And they are a little bit challenging relative to some of the other experiences that we've had in the game. So one unit that in particular that I've been focusing quite a bit on is actually Jianxin. And I'll tell you the exact reason for why that is. If you look at floors 3 and 4 in the ToA, what you'll find out is that there is a heavy attack damage bonus aside, these are more general buffs. There's a heavy attack damage bonus, but then also a buff that you get to your team if they're shielded, where their total damage ends up being increased by up to 48%, depending on how many shields they've refreshed within the past couple of seconds. And I've been experimenting a little bit with some team comps, and one in particular seems to have a lot of potential, but of course, my investment in it isn't as high because it's a character that a lot of us have thrown to the wayside. And that is going to be, ladies and gentlemen, Jianxin. Because one thing that she does with her kit is actually go ahead and generate a shield multiple times. And that's all in her Forte circuit. The ability that many had considered kind of useless because of how long it took. But it turns out I've been doing some runs and we've been getting pretty close to getting some quite powerful clears. And the main thing that I'm testing out right now is whether or not taking her up to level 90, activating some of her sequence nodes because all I have is S1. Seeing if those have a bit of an impact on the overall run. Because I think an S3 Jianxin isn't something that everyone's going to have, but it is, it is something that you might actually have available. And I'm looking at her nodes right now. I don't really think I'm even going to use these. I'll just activate them anyways because she is a standard unit, and you are expected to eventually get a lot of copies of her. I'm also going to raise her up to level 92. Yep, we're going to do that. I'm going to raise her up to level 90, and you know what? I'm even going to take the investment further. I'm going to be using some of these weekly boss mats. Fuck it, right? Let's just take the investment further because I really do think that this character potentially is going to have a little bit of potential in the future. And don't worry, I have enough weekly boss mats of everything else. I'm not griefing too hard right now. I'm excited to see how it performs with some of the additional investments that are being made. Let's take this liberation. It does a decent amount of damage, right? Let's take some of the stuff a little bit higher and just as a bit of like a warning, I will be using a tragic comedy on her, but I will be honest, I don't even think it actually activates properly. So, this bonus to heavy attack only works for 3 seconds, and Jianxin's channel takes longer than 3 seconds. So, I'm using this for now for the base stats. Honestly, you could use some other stuff. We'll see how much of an impact it actually has. We'll switch around some of the weapons a little bit if the clears actually do go well. That's some of the context for some of the investments that I'm going to be making just to test this team out and see whether or not that ability to stack up shields, gain that bonus, is worth slotting in Jianxin on your teams. I'll be sure to point out where there are some slight hiccups with using Jianxin's kit, but also where you can still make some room for optimizations. We're on floor 4 of the ToA right now. All right, so we're just starting over here, doing a little bit of a rotational planning, getting some stuff going. Okay, that took a little bit of... Okay, it's already going bad. I would say using Jianxin's parry isn't the best... Okay, so you're seeing over here where there can be some struggles using Jianxin, because she can actually get interrupted. I would suggest actually angling yourself behind the enemy before you begin a charge, because you'll typically avoid their attack chain that's, well, causing that to happen. So let's try it out one more time with some better positioning on my end. And I'm like to the side of him over here. You can see we kind of dodged some of the big attacks over there, and we were able to get the channel off. Pretty cool. Now we're going to go on to our Permanence Heron, right? Activate Void Thunder with the heavy attack on Zhang Li. And then deliver a massive... I don't know why the damage number didn't show. But you can see over here. This damage is kind of good. It's actually really good. Actually. Around half of its HP in one rotation. Just from putting in Jianxin. And believe me when I tell you this. This character is better than Yinlin for Zhang Liao, at least right now. And when the enemy is broken, she basically just has like a free channel. And that feels pretty good. And so now you can see what the damage per liberation actually is here. And do notice, right? I'm kind of playing the team like a dipshit. I'm not really like dodging attacks. I'm kind of playing like an absolute bum, low key. And the thing is, guys, it's like it's working out pretty okay. So normal. Okay. And now we're just gonna sit here, charge, finish him off with that, and then get ready to just blow up this Lampy Lumen. Uh-oh. All right, well, catch this, bucko. A nice 420k for you, loser. So, I don't know, maybe this clears. Our outro skill did unfortunately fall off while we were frozen. Hopefully it's not too much of like a issue. And there we go. Hopefully we'll be able to get this one. That would be nice. It'll be close. Hopefully he doesn't interrupt me. That would suck. Oh, no, we got frozen. Yeah, so you can kind of see over here where there could be a lot of issues with your run. When the boss does some kind of, well, let's just be honest here, annoying shit, what are you going to do, right? And this guy, he has an AoE domain that he essentially summons. And if you get caught up in it, you get frozen. So that was a misplay on my end by deciding to channel Jianxin's thing where he was frozen. So I just want to see over here, right? Would the rotation's damage have been enough to almost get it? Because naturally, right, I had to extend it a little bit further. Maybe. Maybe. Let's give it another try now and see what it looks like when we try to like get a little bit sweatier with it. This team is more so about positioning, and I had a couple of stalls in that rotation, right? Because I got hit by basically everything that the boss was doing. You saw me get staggered a bunch, but my HP didn't move because of how big Jianxin's shield was. So what if I go in and actually try to dodge a couple more attacks? I'm not just spamming left click on Zhang Liao, I'm doing some more stuff. Let's check it out. You gotta really worry about the positioning against the Dragon of Dirge, because this guy... Can she just tank this one? She can. Sometimes you gotta experiment as well to see which attack chains Jianxin can just muscle through. Because she can just muscle through that one. And Zhang Li, once again, is probably one of the best characters in the game when it comes to dodging enemy attacks in the middle of his rotation. Because that nice time slow, I would say this is one of the more beginner-friendly lineups. This actually feels quite nice. And of course, when the enemy is broken, this rotation feels way easier to get off.
Universe in my psyche.
Oh, wow. This one is actually doing... I don't know what it is. It does feel like this rotation is doing more damage. Why am I on top of a lamp? And so... Was bro just invisible? What was that? So you see this frozen domain that he just made over here? Yeah, I gotta make sure that I don't, well, get caught by that. Otherwise, the freezing's gonna happen. We don't get caught by it there because of good positioning. And now Zhang Li can have some fun. So you can clearly see over here, I think the run is doing a little bit better this time. We're not worrying nearly as much about, like, getting frozen and shit like that. And let's just hope we don't get frozen a third time. It's a little bit dicey. Oh, shit. Well, we got a shield, though. We got our shield. We got our shield. That's enough. We didn't get the full channel off, but we got the shield. Damn. Ah, that's gonna be cutting it close, though. So yeah, we almost got there. And this is kind of like my take regarding the whole thing. I think that there's definitely a lot of room, right, for improvement in that team. I could naturally invest a lot more in my Jianxin. I could naturally invest a lot more in my Zhang Liao. I'm just gonna be upfront with you, right? This Zhang Liao's build is kind of dog shit. You can see over here, he's got like 140% ER, which is way too much. The character needs like 120 and stuff like that. He's kind of running some bum-ass echoes, like this one. I kind of just got my first Nightmare Thundering Mephis. We got like barely above min rolls, and then the rest of these stats don't even do anything. We got okay pieces, but as you can see over here, all of these rolls are kind of like... There's a couple good ones here. There's a lot of bad rolls on the build. These ones are okay, but it's like, you know, minimum crit damage and stuff like that. It's like 70 to 81 on a character like this is pretty okay, right? It's also... There's a lot of bad pieces in the build as well. And there are like, you know, 2, 3, 4 out of 5s. It's pretty good. But also has a lot of room for improvement. The Jianxin that I'm running over here, yes, she is on Tragic Comedy, but, like, the rest of the pieces over here, they're not necessarily, like, the craziest things ever either, right? I don't even have, like, double crit on this one. When I see that I'm missing, like, just that little bit of damage to get, like, the full 3-star clear, part of it, right, is due to the build, but I also think part of it is due to the relative... There are some things that I would do to change this buff. There are a lot of things that I would do to change this buff. First and foremost, what I would dare say is... Maybe the buff should last longer than 6 seconds. Maybe the buff should last something like maybe 10 seconds. To make it so that characters that aren't constantly refreshing a shield can retain a little bit more uptime on the damage buff. Because this is allowing my Zhang Li to do a lot of damage. However, it is falling off kind of like halfway through his rotation, simply due to the fact that it only lasts 6 seconds. And yes, I cast my Liberation, and then that's going to refresh the buff. I only have 6 seconds after Zhang Li throws out that hypercube to start dealing some damage, right? And then I'm going to be losing a pretty significant damage buff overall, right? There's also a comment to make about the fact that Jianxin is one of the lowest damage characters in the game. From the perspective of, if you put her on your team, and she's a sub DPS, she deals way less damage than every other unit. When I'm against some pretty tanky content, being one of those characters that doesn't deal that much damage and is kind of relegating it all to Zhang Li, it can be a little bit rough. She's pretty much outperformed damage-wise by almost every single sub DPS in the game. And she does take up a lot of field time, and that's because she gives the sustain and the shielding. And I just think that with a little bit more work, we definitely do get the clear. But right now, I think that the synergy, unfortunately, isn't fully there yet. With some small updates to this buff, I think that there's a lot of potential to actually get some more of this stuff going. But for right now, I think 6 seconds just isn't long enough. But you can see the vision. And what I really like about using that Zhang Liao and Jianxin team is that it actually feels quite good. It's nice to go in, have Jianxin prime up that shield, and then Zhang Liao jumps in with a massive nuke, right? But it's everything else that sort of follows, and you can literally feel his damage falling off in the middle of the rotation because of how the buff is designed. And to me, having it longer wouldn't necessarily do much at all for those players that are, you know, not using Augusta or not using Yuno. Or it would make a world of difference for the players using it, not using Augusta and Yuno. And if you are using Augusta and Yuno, well, you're not really facing any issues at all with this uptime. So I think that making the buff more accessible for the only shielders in the game would probably be a good idea. Because at the end of the day, it's not like you're slotting in those shielders specifically to activate the buff. I think that the team shielders should get longer than 6 effective seconds to be able to buff their team with this. Because the shielders in this game that refresh the shields aren't really meta anyways. These are the only 2 characters in the game that can stack up multiple shields for their team. ToA does it on her Forte circuit, and Jianxin does it on her Forte circuit. Are these considered tier 0 characters? No. They're actually close to the fucking bottom. They're considered some of the worst units in the game. And my take is, extending this buff to make it more accessible would only benefit ToA and Jianxin, because they're the only characters who can activate this buff for other teammates. These 2 characters are also further limited by the fact that their outro skills only work on Resonance skill damage dealers and only on Resonance liberation damage dealers. So you have one hoop to jump through to have a shield to activate the buff, and then you have the other hoop to jump through of having a character that matches these guys' damage type. And I think that if the stars are aligning to the degree where you're putting in that much effort into your roster building, I think you should be rewarded for longer than 6 seconds of effective uptime if you're putting in the work to prep all of those resources and prep all of those teams. That's my take. I don't think we're diminishing the value of Augusta or Yuno at all by putting in that buff and making it longer. Do you want to know why? Because the person is fucking playing Jianxin or ToA, bro. These are 2 of the most clunky units in the game. You're basically consigning yourself to playing, like, let's just be honest, suboptimal characters to be able to access the buff. That's my feedback. I think it's an okay pass. I think the team does work for a decent amount of time. I think with more practice, I would be able to get it and more knowledge of the boss moveset. And I'm pretty sure ToA teams can actually do a number on these on this reset as well. But at the end of the day, I just think that this is like a bit of an experiment. This is obviously the first pass at the middle tower. At the end of the day, these are merely my suggestions to make it more accessible. I'm okay with there being a little bit more tailored buffs, but when I'm intentionally using 2 teammates that are really, really bad, and they lower the DPS of the team, and they increase your clear time at a baseline, if I'm jumping through the hoops to get them on my team to activate the buffs should at least last long enough to make it worth the expenditure I make it in the first place. That's the testing that we've done. My final takeaway is that I think this team should clear. That's basically what I'm saying. This team should clear. And I think it should clear with a slightly wider margin of ease than what you saw in the gameplay today, because of how well it should be synergizing, right, with the actual buffs that are available. But right now, that vision isn't really fully there. And I think it's really just as simple, right? It's just as simple as changing this 6 to maybe like a 10 or 12. And that's really it. We will be pushing out more and more content surrounding this ToA, surrounding the new endgame. This is just some initial testing that I've been doing on my streams. Hopefully this will help, maybe guide some of the gameplay or the roster building and the character investments you have in the future. Let me know what you all thought. Peace.